Hey guys, tonight we're simmering our way through something even stranger than your aunt's Facebook status updates, the real origins of Halloween. We're traveling back to a time when winter was basically a horror movie, your neighbors might be ghosts, and your greatest technology was a slightly pointier stick. Before we conjure the ancient spirits of confusion, please like the video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy the comforting sound of ancient suffering. Leave a comment telling me your favorite Halloween costume. You know, from back when you could survive a night dressed as a sexy banana without risking frostbite. Now, dim the lights, set a fan for that perfect breeze of spectral chills, and get comfy. Maybe clutch a garlic bulb or two, just in case. Let's reflect. Have you ever wondered if ancient Celts really believed in killer spirits or if they just wanted an excuse to build huge bonfires? How much animal fur is too much for a festive look? Did people go door to door asking for snacks, or just hoping nobody cursed their turnips? Could you blend in at an Iron Age feast, or would your Wi-Fi withdrawal get you exiled to the haunted part of the bog? And now, congratulations! You've just woken up in 800 BCE, somewhere in the mist-soaked, sheep-scented wilds of Ireland. The air is full of smoke, your cloak is suspiciously damp, and there's a 50/50th chance your dinner is ceremonial. Welcome to Samhain. It's the day of Samhain. You're jolted awake by the sound of distant cowbells and the soft thud of someone chopping wood. Your breath fogs in the chilly air of your damp hut, and there's an odd whiff of burning herbs from somewhere outside. Congratulations! You've survived another year. Now you just have to make it through the scariest night of the calendar, preferably without being dragged off by a restless ghost or, worse, asked to help wash root vegetables. You pull your blanket tighter, a scratchy affair woven from sheep's wool and lingering with the memory of the sheep. Last night's fire is just a breath of glowing ash and the hut smells of smoke, earth, and something more indefinable, the promise of mischief that Samhain always brings. Someone in your household, practical as ever, is up already, moving about in the common room and searching for kindling. The thump you heard earlier, that was your aunt, splitting firewood in the yard, setting the rhythm for the day and, unintentionally, making a very effective warning to any wandering spirits, not today, ghosts. Outside, the village is coming alive, if a little nervously. Through the cracks in your shutters, you can hear the shuffle of feet and the creak of an ox cart. This is a day of mixed feelings. On one hand, everyone's glad to have made it to the new year. On the other, nobody is entirely sure if all their neighbors are, technically, alive, or if some shadow might slip through the thinning barrier between worlds and knock at the door. It's not all doom and gloom, though. The air, crisp and edged with frost, is filled with the scents of the season: wood smoke, damp earth, last night's stew, and the ever-present tang of herbs. Here and there, you catch the faintest trace of burning juniper or mugwort, someone else's precaution against any spirit with an overdeveloped sense of curiosity. One year she nearly smoked your family out with whatever she packed into the hearth. Nobody felt haunted, just profoundly hungry and slightly dizzy. As you stretch and shiver your way out from under the blankets, you remember the warnings. Tonight, the doors must be shut tight, the embers banked just so, and whatever you do, don't answer if someone knocks late at night. Even if they claim to be lost, cold, or just in need of a turnip. You roll your eyes a little at the old superstitions, but you'll follow them all the same. Nobody wants to tempt fate, or the side. Breakfast this morning is plain, but hearty. Barley porridge, perhaps a hunk of last year's cheese, if it hasn't grown too adventurous itself, a few windfall apples. Nothing fancy, after all, you never know when the fair folk might be watching, and you definitely don't want to appear greedy today. Silence around the table is broken only by the rustle of clothing and the subdued clatter of wooden spoons. Samhain isn't just another morning. It's a threshold, a hinge between years and worlds. Even the chatty cousin, who can usually be relied upon to fill the room with gossip, is keeping her stories to herself, at least until the sun is properly up and it feels less like sharing secrets with unseen listeners. A rooster crows somewhere. You wonder if it sensed what today is, or if it's just completely oblivious, like your little brother curled in the corner, still asleep. For a moment, you almost envy him. For him, Samhain is still just a word, not a day of threads woven between the living and the dead. The chores can't be put off, of course. Animals need tending, water must be drawn, and, yes, roots always need washing, because apparently even the threat of ghostly kidnapping doesn't get you out of turnip duty. So you gather your courage, wrap yourself in your thickest cloak, and step out into the heavy morning, bracing yourself for work, ritual, and whatever mischief the day ahead might bring. Samhain has arrived, and ready or not, so have you. Step outside into an endless cloud of mist. Every surface is slick, your feet are already soaked, and you're pretty sure your cloak now doubles as a mildew farm. Welcome to the weather report for the ancient Celtic world, where meteorologists have it easy. Today, more rain. Tomorrow, still rain, maybe a light drizzle if you're lucky. Predicting anything else would be about as useful as an iron cauldron with a hole in it. It's not that you can't trust the forecast, it's that you simply can't imagine what it would mean to need sunscreen. Now, if you imagine yourself in early Ireland or across old Britannia, let's get specific. Step into a valley at dawn and you'll likely find yourself enrobed in mist so thick it feels vaguely sentient, like it might follow you home and ask for soup. Rain sputters down in polite, apologetic droplets, or sometimes just descends in sheets so determined that you start to suspect the gods have a personal grudge against dry socks. Every wooden doorframe is swollen with moisture, moss invades your thatch roof, and the only dry season anyone remembers involved someone dropping their bread in the fire. But it's not just about the rain. It's about the never-ending drama in the skies. The sun is a shy recluse who's maybe heard of your village but isn't quite sure she wants to visit. Dawn and dusk are suggested rather than announced, and the world outside slips between shades of slate and pearl with the occasional cameo of something yellow that everyone insists used to be the sun. At night, the fog rolls in so thick that torches seem to swallow their own light, making travelers question their life choices and reconsider the whole heroic quest business. And then there's the wind. For the Celts, wind was not an inconvenience, it was a full-blown character in the mythic pantheon. Some days it's a gentle breeze, coaxing smoke from peat fires and promising a brief window to air out damp tunics. More often, it's a howling, banshee-like presence, threatening to upend your carefully arranged hut or deposit a neighbor's sheep mysteriously in your vegetable patch. Locals rarely pause to comment on the wind. They just pull their cloaks tighter and squint into the distance as if daring the next squall to do its worst. Of course, what really ties the room together is the gentle touch of mild existential terror suffused through every forecast. When you live beneath endless grey, creeping brambles, and the ever-present possibility of being rained on indoors as well as out, your thoughts tend to grow just as damp. It's no surprise that Celtic myths are thick with tales of ghosts, shapeshifters, and eldritch beings who haunt the moors. After all, when your village spends half the year socked in by fog, you start to wonder what's lurking out there, just beyond what you can see, and maybe also under your bed. Even the bravest souls keep one ear cocked for whispers in the mist, and perhaps an iron charm tucked in their belt for reassurance. Still, despite, or perhaps because of, the relentless precipitation, the Celts developed a legendary hardiness and a poetic appreciation for gloom. Songs were sung, legends carved, and the weather was inevitably woven right into the fabric of every story. The stormy night that heralded the birth of a king, the haunted mist that marked a fateful battle, or the interminable drizzle that simply gave everyone another excuse to gather by the fire, trade tales, and wring out their socks. So if you find yourself in the Celtic world, don't forget your cloak, your curiosity, and your sense of humor. If it isn't raining yet, just give it 5 minutes, and if you happen to glimpse something moving in the fog, maybe just let it have the right of way. Today's wardrobe: itchy wool, questionable furs, and a cloak the color of despair. Animal skins keep you warm, at least until they get wet and start smelling like a haunted barn. Bonus if you can fashion a dramatic mask out of dried turnip to scare away passing spirits, or your in-laws. Forget elegant witch hats and those strategically ripped fishnets you see in modern Halloween shop windows. Your ancient Celtic trick-or-treater was swaddled in layers that suggested equal measures of desperation, thrift, and mild rodent activity. Wool was your foundation, ideally not harboring anything alive. Over that, you'd throw on a jumble of sheepskin or, for the truly unfortunate, the greasy pelt of whatever woodland creature you managed to bludgeon for dinner. Why all these animal bits? Well, when you live on the edge of winter, heating bills are less of a concern than not freezing to death before sunrise. Animal skins didn't just keep you alive, they made you look, and possibly smell, like you were ready to negotiate with the spirit world. And indeed, that's what the Celts had in mind. Samhain was a time when the veil between the worlds thinned, meaning any self-respecting villager knew the importance of camouflage, both sartorial and supernatural. The real pièce de résistance, though, was the mask. If you think turning a pumpkin into a jack-o'-lantern is arduous, try hollowing out a shriveled turnip, without power tools, by the glow of a tallow candle. The resulting grimace wouldn't outshine a modern mask for style, but it could definitely scare a spirit or two, not to mention your youngest child. These masks weren't just decorative, they were armor against wandering ghosts, goblins, and possibly that one vengeful neighbor still mad about the time you borrowed his ox.
And the color palette?
Forget fiery reds and lush purples. These were shades of dirt, shadow, and whatever dyes could be coaxed from a handful of moss scraped off a nearby tree. If your clothing happened to match the surrounding mud, congratulations. You were both on trend and less likely to be targeted by things that stalked in the night. As for accessories, utility always trumped vanity. Belts lashed from rope held everything in place, sometimes doubling as emergency snares. Pockets, if they existed, were more illusion than actual storage. Anything valuable was tucked into the folds of your cloak or hung in a little pouch around your neck, next to a sprig of protective herbs. Jewelry was rare, unless you count the stubborn burrs and clinging bits of bramble that inevitably became part of the ensemble. Yet, there was method to this motley. To dress for Samhain was to blur the line between the living and the dead, a practical act of self-preservation. The disguise allowed you to slip through the shadows, one with the flickering night and the watchful spirits. Children, elders, and sheep alike were bundled up to face whatever might come wandering, both spectral and altogether too real. And after the festivities, there was no Instagram post to capture your look, just the memory of a night spent peering through eye holes hacked out of root vegetables and the faint, lingering scent of uncued hide. Sure, the modern Halloween costume is flashier, and far less likely to trigger a mysterious rash, but somewhere beneath the sequins and store-bought masks, the old spirit of Samhain's desperate, inventive, and delightfully haunted fashion season endures. So if you're wondering what to wear to Samhain, remember, it's less about what looks good, and more about what spirits, living or otherwise, you hope to fool. Join your family around a bubbling pot of multi-purpose gruel, flavor it with yesterday's regrets and a pinch of wild herbs. The taste is somewhere between oatmeal and wet hay. If you're lucky, no one threw last year's talisman into the mix. As dawn slips through the gaps in the shutters, the household stirs. A line of family members shuffles to the common table, each clutching a chipped bowl with a mixture of hope and trepidation. The communal breakfast has an undeniable gravity, pulling everyone in, regardless of their enthusiasm. The pot sits in the center, steaming aroma hovering in the air, a scent best described as edible in the most technical sense. Serving is done by ladle, though the ladle was once a boot, as evidenced by the lingering impression of laces around the handle. Rationing is precise, honed through years of mysterious shrinkage in the grain supply. Each person's bowl receives a careful swill of pale gray, flecked with green and, on celebratory mornings, a bit of orange. Conversation begins cautiously, as everyone assesses the day's flavor. Father pronounces the gruel heartening, the same adjective he's used since the last potato shortage. Mother swears she detects a note of juniper, though young Lena points out that the juniper shrub vanished with grandmother's last experiment in stewcraft. Gruel is the great leveler. Children, parents, and elders, all chewing at roughly the same speed, contemplating their existence and the uncertainty over what, precisely, they are ingesting. An ancient tradition demands someone hazard a guess at the secret ingredient. There is a solemn pause. Someone always guesses bark, and it is never bark, but the ritual provides comfort. Laughter is not forbidden, merely discouraged before noon, so the family contents itself with wry grins and small, quiet snorts. Breakfast conversation drifts toward local news, last night's thunder, the return of a particularly bold raccoon to the shed roof, and what to do about the uncertain future of Meal Plan B. Lena dares to suggest sugar as a topping, earning a gently scandalized gasp. Everyone knows last winter's honey jar is eyed only in extremis, and often for barter rather than breakfast. Sometimes, there are surprises. Once, a rogue apple made its way into the pot, sending shockwaves through the family tree. Thus far, the answer has been a resounding no, but hope, like wild thyme, springs eternal, even if it did not survive the last frost. Meal cleanup is a silent negotiation. The youngest learns the delicate art of rinsing a bowl when help is most needed. The eldest preside over the embers, reminding everyone to save the last crust of gruel for the household spirit. Tradition insists the spirit prefers its offerings slightly burnt, possibly as a subtle rebuke for some ancestral oversight. In truth, the communal breakfast ritual is less about sustenance than survival in company. The gruel's flavor is secondary to the hush and hum of shared hardship, to the ancient choreography of passing bowls, the comfort of familiar faces, and the certainty that, whatever the coming day holds, it will be met together, fortified by oatmeal, hay, and the indefinable taste of family. As the bowls clink down for the final time and everyone stands to begin their chores, the morning has done its work. The mystery of the gruel remains unsolved, a secret known only to the pot, the wild herbs, and the midnight hour when the next breakfast is born. Because today isn't just any day, your breakfast is interrupted by the urgent need to scatter offerings around the doorway. A lump of butter for the house spirits, a sliver of bread for the wandering dead, and, for good measure, a carrot left out so trick-or-treating ghosts don't egg your hut. You do this every morning, of course. But today is different. The wind nags at the shutters in a way that makes every hair on your arm stand up and count itself present. You sense, with that peculiar certainty bred of repetition, that the world of the living is thinner at the edges, threadbare, just enough for something from the other side to peek through. Even the dog seems uneasy, slinking in circles as you carefully open the front door, cradling your handful of kitchen scraps. The ritual is simple, but you perform it with the seriousness of a priest. First, you glance skyward, not in the hope of divine intervention, but to ensure you're not being watched by your nosy neighbor across the lane. Nobody wants to be the topic of the next well-side gossip, especially about who gave too little or, worse, too much. Dignity preserved, you crouch and scatter your offerings in an arc, left to right, as the old stories instruct. Butter melts instantly on the cool earth, seeping into the cracks between flagstones. The bread sits there, hopeful, until a bold sparrow hops forward to investigate, cocking its head in judgment. There's a rhythm to all this, a choreography passed down from mothers and grandmothers, whose stern warnings echo in your mind, never forget the spirits. The offerings are both a shield and an apology, a way of saying, I know you're here. Who exactly is appeased by these tokens, the spirits or your own anxiety, is a question you don't linger on before your first sip of tea. Inside, the house is thick with a hush, as if waiting to see that you've done things properly. You move from doorway to windowsill, pinching a crumb here, tucking a flower there, each token turning your mundane cottage into a polite negotiation with the unseen. Some mornings, it feels performative. But on days like this, nerves prickling and shadows lengthening, you're certain you're not alone. You imagine 100 invisible witnesses lined along the fence, each parsing your gestures for intent, weighing whether to bless or bother you in the hours ahead. Of course, you tell yourself it's silly. A superstition fit for the children or the old women who cluster at the market whispering tales of midnight visitors. And yet, you remember the harsh lesson a careless neighbor learned last autumn, a forgotten offering, a week of sour milk, sick chickens, and footsteps in the garden at midnight. Coincidence? Maybe. But you press a little extra bread into a nook by the gate, just in case. When all is done, you step back and admire your handiwork with a kind of reluctant pride. There's an art to these negotiations, knowing just how much to give, when to bow your head, and when to smile as if sharing a private joke with the spirits. Ritual complete, the house feels lighter, as if it's exhaled alongside you. With your obligations fulfilled, you finally finish your cold breakfast and let the day begin in earnest. Later, you may catch a flicker in the corner of your vision, a wisp of movement just outside the window, gone before you can focus. The house settles contentedly. Whether it's superstition or something more, you don't know, but deep down, you're grateful for the excuse to court a little luck. After all, in a world where the boundaries between seen and unseen are never quite clear, a bit of butter and bread seems a small price to pay. After breakfast, it's time to round up the livestock. Every cow is nervy, every sheep acts like it's seen a ghost, which, today, isn't out of the question. The goal: lock them safely in the pen before something spectral tries to borrow them for a midnight joyride. The sky outside has a bruised look, a shade between storm and apocalypse. Anyone who has herded anything larger than a house cat knows, animals are natural barometers for chaos. This morning, the cows huddle at the far end of the pasture, tails flicking, snorting nervously. They have picked up on the unease in the air, or maybe it's just the unmistakable scent of zombie musk drifting from the woods. Either way, you're not herding happy pets, you're negotiating with nature's biggest drama queens. Now, herding on a normal day is mostly a matter of patience and shoe leather. But throw in the possibility of undead interlopers, and it becomes a contestant's worst reality TV challenge. Picture this: one eye on the cows, the other on the ridgeline, scanning for any shape that moves with a certain shamble. Your heart ticks a little faster every time a branch snaps or a shadow flits where there shouldn't be one. Neighbors who scoffed at your zombie readiness kit are suddenly not so vocal. You're the only one with the proper equipment: a heavy-duty flashlight, noise-cancelling earmuffs, in case the banshees drop by, and a stick, because, while it's mostly for prodding cows, in a pinch, it's also your first line of defense against a nosy corpse. The sheep, meanwhile, are having an existential crisis. They bunch up, eyeing each other with that wide, slightly unhinged gaze only sheep manage. If a single one breaks rank, all bets are off, they'll scatter like woolly fireworks. Today, you mutter encouragements to yourself as much as to the animals: just a little closer, guys. Stay with the group. As you begin the shuffle, your boots sink into the dewy grass and the barn looms invitingly close yet infuriatingly far. It's a low-stakes sprint, except the stakes have never felt higher. You use every trick you know, tempting them with sweet feed, whistling the same tune Grandpa swore soothed nervous cattle, and, in more desperate moments, resorting to dramatic flapping gestures that, you'll never admit this, seem to amuse at least one lurking zombie. Midway through, there's a moment of slapstick chaos. A cow spooks, the sheep see their chance, and suddenly it's not just you trying to outrun the undead, but also a stampede of terrified, supernatural convinced farm animals. Any notion of composure evaporates as you sprint after the bolters, arms flailing, laughter threatening to bubble up at the sheer absurdity of the moment, if only the situation weren't so deadly serious. Somewhere in the commotion, you catch a glimpse of movement at the tree line. You freeze, half expecting a decaying hand to reach toward a sheep's fleece. But it's only Mrs. Jenkins from down the lane, equally harried, equally cow-chased. Mutual relief is exchanged with a wave, two survivors in a world where neighborly now means sharing tips on how to keep both zombies and errant goats off your property. With a mix of cajoling, wheedling, and the promise of oat treats, you finally steer the herd into the pen. The gate clangs shut. The livestock cluster inside, huffing and muttering, three shades of spooked but intact. You lean on the fence, catching your breath, surveying the field for any lingering threat. For now, at least, the biggest peril is the cows themselves. You survived another herding session, outwitted the undead and the unduly dramatic cattle, and have a barn full of animals to show for it. You shake out your arms, try to stop your heart from pounding, and allow yourself a grin. These are strange days, but you're stranger, and a little bit faster, than whatever the world throws at you. At least this morning. Gather at the communal bonfire site, where villagers pile wood higher than your hopes for a dry winter. Lighting the Samhain bonfire is half spiritual ceremony, half excuse to set things ablaze while glancing nervously at the shadows. There's an almost mischievous energy in the air as dusk falls and the flames threaten to outshine the stars. The entire village, from the tiniest child with sticky cider fingers to the stoutest grandfather still claiming his knees don't hurt, circles the growing pyramid of logs and brambles. It creaks and groans under its own weight, like it knows it's about to go out in a blaze of ancient glory. Before the flames roar, there's a hush, the kind that arrives just before something important happens, like a wedding kiss or the last penalty kick of a tied soccer match. People are here not just for warmth or for spectacle, but because this act means something. It's both a farewell and an invitation. The old year, represented by the last dying woodpile of last Samhain's fire, is driven away. The new year is welcomed with crackling optimism and, let's be honest, a healthy dose of pyromaniac glee. Then, with the help of an elder wielding a torch as if it's a wand, the fire is lit. There's an apprehensive step back, everyone's a little wary of what they've built and what's about to happen. The first flames lick hungrily at the dry twigs, smoke coiling upwards, and then comes that whoosh, a wall of heat and orange light that blasts away the November chill and makes even the bravest souls blink. All around, faces are bathed in shifting gold, and for a moment you could believe the spirits of the land are dancing just outside the glow, daring each other to come closer. Don't imagine everyone stands solemnly and meditates on the mysteries of the universe. No, half the point is the spectacle, a collective guilty pleasure. This is the original group fireworks night, minus the health and safety guidelines. Teenagers sneak sideways glances at the flames, probably pondering how close they can get before a parent scolds them. Someone's always roasting something on a stick: bread, apples, small charred potatoes, maybe a sausage for the lucky. And listen carefully, the fire sings. It pops and cracks, wood snapping in protest as it gives itself over to the flames. Somewhere behind you, the village storyteller uses the show as dramatic lighting, their voice rising above the din, sharing tales of fairies and spirits and why it's very wise to be home before midnight tonight.
Why all this fire?
In practical terms, the bonfire was thought to have cleansing powers. Cattle were driven between twin blazes to protect them from disease. Embers were gathered and taken home to relight the hearth, thought to bring luck for the coming year. The fire is a literal and symbolic barrier between the old harvest season and the dark, uncertain months ahead. But beneath the tradition, there's that primal joy, gathering against the dark, transforming fear into spectacle. The fire is a beacon, a promise that the community endures. The faces flickering in the light may change over the years, but the circle stays unbroken. By the end, shoes are scorched, hair smells of smoke, and everyone's eyelids droop from the ritual as much as from the ember's hypnotic warmth. As the flames die down, villagers peel away into the night, clutching glowing embers like tiny pieces of the sun. The bonfire remains, sending its last sparks spiraling into the dark, a reminder that even as the days grow short and the cold creeps in, the light, like the community, will return. Everyone's too busy warding off ghosts to vacuum, so Samhain cleaning means sweeping out ashes, hanging up protective rowan branches, and beating the rugs into submission. If you find ancient crumbs or a shrunken head, it's considered good luck. Probably. Let's be honest, a Samhain deep clean isn't your regular spring tidying. At this liminal time of year, cleaning takes on a mythic edge. You're not just looking for dust bunnies, but for the mischievous spirits who might have taken up residence with your pile of winter shoes. Start with the fireplace or hearth. Even if you don't have a witchy cauldron bubbling away, this is traditionally the heart of the home, both physically and magically. In old Celtic homes, sweeping out the ashes after the Samhain fires meant bidding farewell to the year's troubles, and making space for new luck. Modern translation: grab your broom, sweep with purpose, and mutter something vaguely mystical under your breath. Out with the old, in with the bold is a perfectly acceptable incantation. Next, if you happen to have a stash of rowan branches, traditionally considered powerful protectors against wayward spirits, now's the time to hang them up over your doorways. If not, a substitute sprig of rosemary or bay will do. Visualize them acting as magical do not disturb signs for any ghosts who may have forgotten to RSVP. Adorn your windows, lintels, and even the family cat, if they'll allow it. These little touches, whether you believe in their magical force or just enjoy the look, signal a change in season and a sense of ritual that feels both ancient and oddly comforting. When it comes to rugs, this is your opportunity to channel the full force of your Samhain spirit. Take them outside, give them a good thrashing, and imagine you're chasing away not just dust, but any lingering bad luck, sadness, or embarrassing Halloween costume memories. The more flair, the better. If you want to shout, "Begone, you foul energies," while you beat the carpets, no one's judging, except perhaps your neighbors, who are now rethinking their own cleaning routines. As you clean, stay alert for what the year has left behind: a lone glove, a half-burned candle, or, if you're lucky, one of those legendary good luck shriveled snacks from last Samhain. Some folks say these hidden relics are charms, proof that you've survived another turn of the wheel. At the very least, consider them conversation starters for next year's gathering. Nothing bonds a group like discovering mysterious objects behind the couch. Don't forget the windows. These are the soul's portals in and out of the home. Give them a wipe with vinegar and water. Old folklore insists this wards away negativity and makes it harder for spirits to peer in on your Netflix marathon. For a modern twist, squeegee with determination and pretend you're in a cleaning montage from your favorite spooky rom-com. The final touch: open wide the doors and windows, even if just for a few chilly moments. Let the brisk wind carry out whatever heavy energy and dust remains. Some folks light incense or sprinkle salt at thresholds. Feel free to customize your own boundaries. Remember, the real spirit of a Samhain clean is in the intention. making space for hope, luck, and whatever good surprises await in the long winter nights ahead. So, put on your favorite playlist, witchy or otherwise, and sweep, scrub, and ward your way into a new season. And if you happen to find a shrunken head, maybe leave that mystery for the spirits to sort out. Every cool kid has their own homemade charm: bones, carved wood, or an "I survived last Samhain" bracelet. You string together bits of raven feather and sheep wool, and voila, you're now only 30% likely to be possessed tonight. But before you ransack Grandma's button box for sacred relics, pause and consider: what are you actually trying to ward off? Is it the evil eye from your neighbor, the literal creeping cold of a haunted October evening, or just the existential dread that shows up after watching 3 horror movies alone? The function shapes the form, as the village blacksmith used to say, right before he welded a nail into that horseshoe, slapped it above his door, and happily repelled both fae and tax collectors for another year. Step 1. Materials matter. Amulet construction is about intention, but let's not underestimate materials. Traditionally, protection comes in tactile forms: iron nails, fairies hate them; dried rosemary, so do demons, apparently; mirrors, because even spirits can be vain; and, yes, animal bones, though please, only ones you've found, not stolen from someone's sacred stew pot. For the eco-goth crowd, acorns, bits of quartz, or sun-bleached shells work wonders. Whatever you choose, run it through the triple witches test. 1. Is it natural? 2. Is it weird? 3. Will your cat try to eat it? If you get 2 yeses, you're on the right path. Step 2. Ritual assembly. A slightly sticky part. Sit at a table, light a candle for atmosphere, bonus if it's black or purple, and array your chosen items in a pleasingly mysterious pattern. Don't stress over Instagram aesthetics. This is folk magic, not a craft contest. Half the power is in believing you have power. Step 3. The secret ingredient: intent. No amulet works if you're just phoning it in. Seriously, there are enough idle trinkets lining the bottom of every drawer in every house since the Neolithic era. You have to believe this silly, beautiful thing will do its job. Focus your intention. Picture that invisible wall around you, that shimmer in the air, just keeping the weird vibes out, or at least reserving them for family gatherings. You can whisper your worries into a bead before stringing it, etch a secret sigil somewhere discreet, or put that little bone on backwards just to confuse any lurking spirits. Step 4. The finishing touch. Once assembled, your amulet needs activation. In the old days, this meant passing it through smoke, salt, or a dog's cold nose. Today, you can wave it through incense or just give it a dramatic Hollywood-style flourish. Hang it above your door, wear it on your chest, or gift it to a jumpy friend. Each time you look at it, remember, protection is as much about the story you tell yourself as it is about any bits of knotted twine. Closing notes: the legacy of homemade charms. Building your own protection amulet isn't just about dodging this year's crop of banshees and spectral horses. It's a way to tap into something ancient, playful, and, if you're doing it right, a little bit ridiculous. Your ancestors did it, your friends will side-eye it, and some night, when the wind howls just wrong, you'll be glad you took the time. Because, really, who couldn't use a little more luck strung around their neck? Let me know if you want this adjusted for length, detail, or with additional folklore. Feast prep means foraging for whatever hasn't died of frost or spooky curse. Root veggies, wild apples, and possibly cabbage older than civilization. Locally sourced, with a faint aftertaste of terror. Before sunrise, you tug on boots that sigh with the memory of last autumn's mud and secrecy. The air tugs at your nostrils, sharp enough to make you sneeze, and every step outside crunches over a mystery. Sometimes it's frost, sometimes it's a leftover crow feather. Either way, it's a soundtrack for desperate optimism. The actual hunt for ingredients is a twisted scavenger hunt. You survey the skeleton remains of your once bountiful garden. Turnips lurk like subterranean trolls, stubbornly clinging to the earth, their purple heads defiant against the cold. Dig them up gently, they bruise as easily as your ego after last feast's cabbage pie debacle. Meanwhile, the wild apples, wrinkled, misshapen, but miraculously edible, taunt you from the highest branches. Accept that they will taste like night air and mild regret, with bonus points for bitter seeds. Neighbors pass by on their own foraging missions, arms laden with equally questionable produce. There's a silent competition in who can scrounge the weirdest ingredient. Last year's winner brought a potato that looked distressingly like the village elder. He hasn't been invited since. As your haul accumulates, muddy carrots, possibly parsnips, a cabbage that predates language, you return, triumphant or at least not empty-handed, which is about the same around here. Spices are rare, but if you're extra lucky, a stowaway sprig of wild thyme or leftover allium might cling to your boots like a secret. You consider your options: roast, stew, or resignedly stew then roast. Culinary creativity is born of necessity, or sometimes whatever you can't identify by smell alone. It's not all gloom. Tradition dictates that food, no matter its origins, becomes infinitely more valuable once scrubbed and arranged with ceremonial hope on the long, battered table. The act of cleaning root vegetables becomes a meditation. Scrape away the dirt, unearth hope. Each slice and dice is accompanied by a litany of whispered bargains. Just don't turn to mush, please, not this year. Every failed cobbler or overcooked beet is a tale for the ages. Aunt Murrell claims these scrolls carry the flavor of days when everything didn't taste slightly of storage cellar. She could be lying, but you're too busy wrangling onions to argue. With the oven roaring, or fire crackling, if the oven gave up in last winter's storm, the kitchen fills with a chaotic warmth. Pots bubble, giving off mingled scents of earth and something that might be hope. There's arguing over who gets to taste test first. Spoonfuls are passed around for approval, met with grave nods and small, cautious smiles, until someone finds a pebble in the soup and everyone claims immunity from further tasting duties. At last, dishes are lined up on an improvised altar of reclaimed planks. The cabbage is triumphant, the carrots defiant, the apples mysterious. Whatever the results, everyone present will eat, laugh, and recount the saga of that one dinner when the parsnip fought back. Because in the end, preparing the feast isn't just about what you cook, but that you dared to cook at all, with a boldness born of refusing to let the long, weird year win. Eat up. Tomorrow, it might all turn back into compost and cautionary tales. Tonight, cook it or lose it. Nobody carves pumpkins yet. Here, it's all about hollowing out a wrinkled turnip, gouging out a face, and sticking a bit of coal inside. If your creation looks like your neighbor, don't bring it up. Serious faux pas. Let's set the scene. The kitchen smells like earth, cold air slipping through the cracks in the window. Your tools are basic: a rusty spoon, perhaps a paring knife. Across the table sits Grandad, who insists that you're doing it all wrong. No, the eyes must slant so it can see evil spirits sneaking up behind, he grumbles, guiding your hand with surprising strength for someone who claims he can't lift a kettle. Turnip carving isn't just a solitary pursuit. This is group work, family sport, and rivalry. There's always one cousin who turns his turnip into the likeness of the bishop, and everyone laughs, but not too loudly. There are still stories about what happened when the bishop's turnip found its way to the chapel steps. Competition brings out the best in everyone, or the most mischief. There will be flour on sleeves, mud on the floor, and clumps of root on the old linoleum by the time the first twisted grins appear in the candlelight. The work is painstaking. Turnips are no easy canvas. They're knobby, fibrous, and often sting your fingers. Every face takes effort, eyes askew, teeth jagged, brows furrowed in expressions of either comic horror or true terror, depending on your artistry and mood. As you carve, stories fly around the room. Someone will claim their mask scared off a ghost last year. Another will recount how, when carried out into the creeping dusk, a particularly hideous turnip startled old Mrs. Flanagan so badly she dropped a milk pail and hasn't forgiven the children since. Once carved, each turnip receives its ember or coal, stolen from the hearth with some ceremony. The smoky, orange glow doesn't so much light up the face as animate it, making it seem alive, mischievous, or gently threatening. It's the moment of truth. Does your turnip leer, glower, or simply sulk? Everyone holds their breath for the reveal, then bursts into either applause or groans, depending on whether the crafted horror matches the expectation. But it's not all just for show. There's an intent with each terrible face. According to tradition, these masks ward off evil. The uglier, the better. It's a contest with supernatural stakes. You might be fending off wandering spirits, figures from old stories, or the lingering sense of something not quite right out there beyond the hedge. The sense of communal effort, combined with just a thread of fear, makes the ritual feel like one part game, one part genuine magic. In the end, the kitchen transforms. Window ledges are lined with gnarled, glowing faces. You step back and take in the scene, home transformed into a defensive battlement against the night, laughter lingering in the air, shadows dancing on the walls as the turnips flicker. Whether your turnip is mockingly ghastly or just slightly lopsided doesn't matter. In this place and time, every handmade mask is a ticket to participate in something old, odd, and entirely unforgettable. And as you carry your creation out into the cold, ready to parade it, surprise a friend, or maybe just guard your own doorway, you're part of a line stretching back generations. It may be primitive, and sometimes the result is more comic than chilling, but in the right hands, with a bit of flickering coal, even a humble turnip can hold enough terror to keep the old stories alive for another year. As the fire builds, you gather with friends for hot mold complaints about local witches, wandering spirits, and which cousin was most recently turned into a goat. There's nothing quite like the gossip of an Irish afternoon, especially when talk turns supernatural. Someone always claims to have heard a neighbor muttering odd syllables or seen a suspicious cat cross the lane. The center of it all, for better or worse, is old Mrs. O'Shea, whose garden grows suspiciously well, and who wears shawls that never seem to get wet in the rain. You recall the village's long-standing consensus: Mrs. O'Shea is most definitely a witch, or at least knows someone who is. A hush falls when she strolls by, seemingly heading nowhere, her basket brimming with strange, sweet-smelling herbs. You and your companions share stories. Last year, Finn next door swore up and down that a particularly nasty cough only left when he placed a scrap of silver under his pillow. Advice, he claimed, whispered by Mrs. O'Shea herself. Maeve, beside you, insists she saw lights flicker through Mrs. O'Shea's window long after midnight, weaving shapes that looked suspiciously like dancing fairies. It's lucky she likes us, Maeve adds, only half joking. It doesn't take long before other names enter the conversation. Old tales float up from memory. The time young Bridget found her hens laying eggs of unnatural size after an argument with her neighbor, or when the local baker's sourdough starter died after he raised prices on All Hallows' Eve. These little mysteries are traded back and forth with the same relish as bits of shortbread and sips of punch. Spirits and witches are excellent scapegoats for the village's inconvenient happenings. Just as the sun slips behind a cloud, Auntie Eula leans in and lowers her voice. She recounts the infamous autumn when her great-uncle, God rest him, heard a woman singing from the hedgerow at twilight, so lovely and forlorn that he was enchanted on the spot. For weeks afterward, he wandered the moors nightly, lost in thought and shoes, only to emerge with a single white feather and not much explanation. It's not all warnings and suspicions. These stories have a way of gathering joy, too, in their telling. There's laughter at the idea of a cousin sprouting horns just to skip Sunday Mass, and delight in describing the village priest's attempts to bless Mrs. O'Shea's hedgerow with holy water, which mysteriously evaporated before it even hit the ground. Even as you poke good-natured fun at superstition, the talk has a familiar rhythm, awe, wariness, exaggeration, and a kernel of respect for the unknowable. No one really wants to anger the spirits, or the witches, or even the local cat, just in case. You all agree, in the end, that it's best to leave out a saucer of milk, tuck a bit of iron in your pocket, and greet Mrs. O'Shea with a polite nod, just to be safe. Finally, as the shadows lengthen and mugs run dry, the collective nerves begin to settle. The rumors and stories, like the embers in the fire, glow warmly in the gathering dusk. You part ways knowing that at Samhain, belief and disbelief braid together, binding neighbor to neighbor in a tapestry woven from fear, wonder, and a healthy dose of mischief. And so, as you rise and stretch, you can't help but glance back at Mrs. O'Shea's gate, just to see if anything, or anyone, is watching, and if the next gossip will be about you. No festival is complete without the druids, part priest, part community therapist, part pyrotechnics expert. Today they're busy blessing the fire, chanting, and remembering which side of the stick to wave around. But who exactly were these enigmatic figures? To the uninitiated, druids conjure images of grey-bearded men in flowing robes muttering to trees under the moonlight. Think Gandalf's earthier cousin, if he also scheduled the village's annual cow parade. In reality, druids were both more and less mystical than pop culture suggests. While they played up the magical side when it suited them, they were also grounded in the everyday. Doctors, judges, teachers, and all-purpose fixers. If you had a squabble with your neighbor or a toothache that needed more than a poultice, the druid was your guy, or gal, as women also held the role. At Beltane, the druid's main job is to call in the spirits, sprinkle a little sacred theatre on the proceedings, and keep everyone at a mild simmer of awe and respect. First up, the blessing of the fire. If you're picturing an elaborate ritual involving rare herbs and the secret names of stars, you're only ever so slightly off. The whole process is a mix of the serious and the slapstick. There's incense for the gods, a solemn procession, and more than a whiff of practical safety demonstration, because nothing says ruined festival like accidentally torching the chieftain's beard. Once the fire is blessed, it serves as the centerpiece for the night, a beacon not only for humans, but for the unseen. Ancient Celts saw Beltane as a thin time, when the veil between worlds was sheer as linen. Spirits wander, ancestors visit. The druids act as MCs for cosmic guests, inviting in the helpful spirits and politely gently ushering away the mischief makers. This requires a very specific type of charisma, part diplomat, part bouncer, all showman. But don't be fooled by the robes and the chants. Much of what druids do is simply good community psychology. They give folks someone to blame if the weather turns, someone to thank for a bumper crop of turnips. The ritual gives people a sense that chaos is kept at bay, not just by the hands of the gods, but by the steady presence of a neighbor who's memorized all the best stories and knows which herbs cure hiccups. That sense of balance, the sacred and the silly, runs through every part of the festivities. After the firelighting, druids might lead a procession or oversee the symbolic jumping of the flames, where villagers hop over tongues of fire for luck and fertility. If this all sounds like intense outdoor group therapy, that's because it is. The memory of winters past, when hunger walked close, tinges every celebration. Acts of renewal aren't just for the crops or for the gods, but for the soul of the village itself. Underneath it all, druids act as a bridge, connecting the living to the dead, the practical to the magical, the nervous to the hopeful. Even if you're just there for the snacks and a chance at nuptial matchmaking, the presence of these eccentric guides reminds you that you belong to a story much larger than your own, to a lineage of flame watchers, spirit speakers, and keepers of the weird. So as the druid circles the fire, waving that stick with a secret smile, give them a nod. They're not just local color. They're the glue that binds the whole blessed, bonkers, beloved Beltane together. As dusk approaches, everyone gets worked up about omens. Did a raven caw from the wrong tree? Did your bread fall butter side down? Is your neighbor's ear twitching? Omens, it seems, are less about predicting the future and more about finding patterns in the wild scribblings of daily life. In a village where every sneeze could be an omen and every hiccup a harbinger, the locals have turned paranoia into something of an art form. There's a twitch in the air, a motion at the corner of the eye. And just like that, the hunt for significance begins. What did it mean that Old Man Heron's rooster crowed at noon instead of dawn? Best to gather outside, peer at the horizon, and invent a story. In this climate, birds become more than birds. They are airborne telegrams for the anxious. A blackbird flies west, and the baker clutches his apron. A pair of sparrows darting through the chimney prompts a neighbor to count out loud to ensure her chickens are still there. Children, half expecting the sky to open up with prophesies, toss stones at pigeons to shuffle the deck, so to speak, hoping a new flight pattern will cancel out the last warning. Then there's the matter of baked goods. If a pie collapses in the oven, the consensus is clear: calamity. If the crust shatters like pottery, expect an argument over dinner. But if a pie slice is missing, a neat triangle removed when no one was looking, neighbors gather like detectives, weighing possibilities as though the universe chipped in for dessert. Was it a sign of lost fortune, or did the village cat simply get there first? Uncertainty prevails. The cats, wisely, refuse to comment. Interpreting omens is a communal pastime, mixing equal parts logic, folklore, and outright improvisation. The elders boast of reading the pie, dissecting crumbs and gaps with forensic intensity. Long ago, they'll say, when the pie split unevenly, a wandering tinker arrived before sunrise. Tales shift with the wind, and each telling adds a new twist. Soon, random birds have backstories. Pie slices become omens of abundance or famine, and the color of a neighbor's hat is not simply fashion, but a weather forecast. Of course, all this is less about fear and more about belonging. The performance of worrying together, the ritual retelling of misinterpreted signs, binds the villagers in a gentle conspiracy. Someone will ask, prompting a group to remember the last time the river flooded, which was, as it happens, also the last time a magpie was spotted on that very fence.
Coincidence? Probably. Convincing? Absolutely.
At the day's close, when shadows lengthen and the smell of cooling pies fills every home, the collective tension softens. There is relief in sharing small, irrational anxieties with others. The line between genuine warning and silly superstition blurs. Laughter weaves through ominous mutterings. In time, the daily hunt for signs becomes just another reason to spend the evening together, watching the birds settle for the night and waiting, half hopeful, for the pie to be served. So, as night falls and the stars whisper their own ancient secrets, remember, sometimes the best omen is the one everyone invents together, a sign that neither confirms nor denies, but always entertains. In this town, existential dread comes with a slice of blackberry pie and a healthy dose of neighborly speculation. If tomorrow brings a new omen, at least you'll have company interpreting it, and maybe a little extra pie to go around. Night falls fast, and suddenly every bush looks haunted. You clutch your fur cloak, squint at unfamiliar shadows, and debate whether the howling is a wolf or just your stomach reacting to the gruel. As the sun slips behind ragged clouds, the world transforms. All the familiar landmarks, the leaning oak, the winding path, become treacherous in the muddled gloom. Every snapping twig is a portent of doom. What was scenic and serene by daylight turns into a tangle of foreboding shapes and ominous silhouettes. Your modest campfire sputters valiantly, but its thin glow only succeeds in casting jittery shadows that dance along the trees like restless ghosts, or at least that's what your overactive imagination suggests. This, of course, is the moment everyone in the party remembers that their torch-making lesson ended in disaster. Now, you're rationing precious tallow candles and hoping the moon will make an appearance, unlike last night, when cloud cover left you with nothing but darkness thick enough to trip over. The bard, who promised to lighten the mood with a merry tune, is now plucking apprehensive notes that sound suspiciously like the theme from every nightmare you've ever had. Mandatory spookiness is, well, mandatory for a reason. Darkness means danger, everyone knows that. In every fireside story, it's always the deep hours of the night when the monsters crawl from their lairs, when haunted spirits roam, and when goblins emerge demanding suspicious tolls for crossing perfectly ordinary bridges. Now, sitting in the hush interrupted only by distant croaks and the low whoosh of wind, you find yourself believing every bedtime tale. Even the party's boldest member, usually so quick to taunt the unknown, is sticking uncharacteristically close to the smoldering embers. But there's a rhythm to this unease. As the minutes creep onward, conversation dwindles. Eyes flick left and right, each person searching for reassurance in their neighbor's terrified expression. Occasionally, someone tries a joke to pierce the tension, but the laughter is short, hollow, and quickly swallowed by the night. The rustle of small animals in the undergrowth becomes the threatening advance of shadowy foes. A falling pine needle triggers visions of legendary horrors. Even the gentle sigh of leaves rubs against your last nerve. Still, necessity breeds creativity, or maybe just desperation. One party member invents a new monster called the creep, presumably because it's exactly what everyone feels like. Another suggests a rotation for night watch, and for about 5 minutes you all debate the merits of staying awake in pairs versus threes. The conclusion? If everyone stays awake, then at least you can be collectively confused when something finally jumps from the gloom. Of course, what really jumps is the family of owls you didn't notice in the tree above. Their sudden hoots send a wave of shock through the camp, followed by breathless, embarrassed laughter. For a moment, the specter of supernatural doom is dispelled by the perfectly mundane terror of bird calls. But no one's buying it. Eventually, the mandatory spookiness ebbs into something softer. The night is still full of noises and shapes, but the frenzied edge blunts as your eyes adjust and your party settles into the ritual of sharing exaggerated fears. Some recount stories from home, grandmothers who claimed wild cats could turn invisible, or uncles who warded off goblins by humming out-of-tune lullabies. Somehow, putting words to the terror seems to diminish it. And so, by the time your watch arrives, The arrival of darkness feels less like invasion and more like an awkward, inevitable guest at the world's longest sleepover. You're tired, a little cold, but no longer fully convinced that the forest is out to get you. You wrap your cloak tighter, stare into the fire, and decide, dawn feels a long way off, but you've faced the spooky hour and survived. For now, that's enough. The entire village parades around the fire, masked and costumed, hoping to scare away evil spirits, and, simultaneously, each other. It's a cross between a religious observance and the world's creepiest block party. As twilight deepens, lanterns flicker to life along the perimeter, casting grotesque shadows that distort the faces of the celebrants. Every year, the costumes seem to get stranger, the masks more elaborate and unsettling. Some participants dress as ancient spirits, tall, with exaggerated antlers or trailing robes woven from dried grass. Others take inspiration from local gossip, arriving in slyly rendered parodies of their neighbors. And, because the villagers have never quite shaken their sense of mischief, a handful show up in costumes so absurd, think, a goat riding a bicycle or a two-headed fisherman arguing with itself, that even the most stoic onlookers can't stifle a laugh. What begins as a solemn, intentional procession inevitably unravels into a spectacle of barely contained chaos. The pounding of hand drums keeps time as everyone moves counterclockwise around the bonfire in a circuit. Grandmothers hobble behind towering stick creatures, children dart through the crowd shrieking behind painted masks, and teenagers jostle each other while attempting to maintain at least a facade of seriousness. The richer families vie to outdo one another with imported beads and dyed fabrics, but the mayor's youngest son wins for originality. He's disguised as a massive turnip, requiring two friends to roll him along whenever he topples over. Throughout the parade, a series of spirit wardens patrol the edge of the throng, volunteers shrouded in white linen, swinging smoldering braziers of herbs believed to purify the air. They shout invented chants with exaggerated gravitas, blending sacred tradition with a side helping of village in-jokes. Every so often, a warden will leap into the crowd, brandishing a rubber chicken or a broom, sending bystanders scattering. For the briefest moment, you might actually believe that evil spirits are being expelled, if only through the power of mass hysteria. The pageantry is less about genuine terror and more about collective catharsis. In the anonymity of their disguises, villagers take license to act out, shed inhibitions, and poke affectionate fun at community quirks. The oldest man in the village, hunched behind a crow mask, reenacts a year-old dispute over missing laundry with exaggerated theatrical offense. The town midwife, always the first to laugh at herself, staggers about with a papier-mâché baby as big as a watermelon, winking as the children giggle uncontrollably. There are skits and staged arguments, each deliberately overblown for comedic effect, an unspoken agreement to face fears by rendering them ridiculous. As the processional circle tightens, the drumming intensifies. The masks no longer look quite so comical in the firelight. For a split second the mood pivots, an uncanny hush falling over the crowd. Every villager feels the age-old tension between amusement and awe. The night air is heavy with anticipation. Will the spirits be satisfied this year? Or will some mischief slip through, a bad harvest, an unexplained illness, an inconveniently leaky roof? Suddenly, with a triumphant blast of a conch shell, the spell is broken. Laughter erupts, the crowd spills onto the grass, and faces are revealed beneath sweat-smudged masks. The turnip boy tumbles free, arms held high, and someone tosses a roasted chestnut to the fisherman still arguing with himself. And just like that, the grand procession dissolves into memory, half magic, half mayhem, entirely their own. Finally, you sit down for a long, smoky meal, roasted turnips, dubious stew, apples that may or may not bite back. The goal is simple: eat enough to last the winter, and maybe bribe a ghost with leftovers. The room is thick with the perfume of wood smoke and burning sage. Shadows flicker across stacked pewter plates, and the table groans beneath heaping baskets of roots yanked from the earth no more than a week ago. There's dirt under your fingernails and smoke in your hair, but right now, all that matters are the bowls passed from hand to grimy and eager hand. First come the turnips, singed and blistered, their skins crisped by open flame. You hesitate only a moment. Turnips are infamous for bitterness, sometimes hoarding the cold in their cores. But tonight, cloaked in a slick of butter and a pinch of salt burned black by the fire, they're nearly sweet. Each bite is a dare. Will it nourish, or have you gnawing your tongue in regret? A cousin, whose name is forgotten every year until feast night, grins at you through a mouthful of roots and mutters a benediction against indigestion. Next, the stew, ladled from a cauldron big enough to drown a dog. It's thick as graveyard soil and just as likely to sprout the unexpected. The vegetables have lost any semblance of shape or pride, subsumed by hours of slow surrender to bubbling broth. Strange, unnamed chunks float alongside turnip and rutabaga, with the occasional slippery root that surely wasn't invited. But no one questions it, for this is the meal of survival. If it grows underfoot, it finds its way to the pot, and only the very bold demand a list of ingredients. A child delicately picks out a suspicious tuber, frowns, and slips it into their pocket as tribute for the resident ghost, who is said to favor weird and warty offerings. Between courses, you gnaw on bread hard enough to threaten teeth and sop up the oil released by a festival's worth of potatoes, mashed, fried, and boiled to glistening translucence. The potatoes seem to multiply as the evening progresses, as though every bite summons another heap. Your jaw aches, but the warmth spreading through your limbs is convincing enough. Resistance feels foolish, possibly even unlucky. Apples appear, waxy and irregular. Each bite is a gamble. Some are astonishingly sweet, reminiscent of sunshine and warm afternoons. Others cause your lips to pucker as if stung. These are the apples that keep secrets, or so the story goes, apples that have weathered frost and whispering winds, storing up stories in their core. The bravest at the table reach for seconds, trading wry smiles with those who remember last year's spectral toothache. Yet, amid the abundance, superstition governs every gesture. Bones are tucked into ragged cloth for burying at the crossroads. Peels are flung onto the fire, curling like question marks as they burn. Each leftover is examined for its best use, as an offering, a charm, or a last-ditch effort to steer misfortune away from the door. You listen as the old ones spin tales, of haunting hunger, of winters when the stew was only water and hope, of ghosts who wander in search of one more mouthful. It's their warnings, half joking and half true, that nudge you into taking a third helping long after you should have stopped. You eat, not out of greed, but out of ancient muscle memory, an instinct pressed into you by generations who counted every slice. When at last the meal quiets, when plates are mostly empty and bellies round, a heavy peace settles over the room. Outside, the wind howls and bats at the shutters. Inside, the air hums with contentment edged in relief. For tonight, the ghosts are fed, the winter is held at bay, and, if you're lucky, the apples won't bite back until spring. Let me know if you'd like the tone adjusted or further elements incorporated. Everyone gets a chance to learn their fate, by peeling apples, burning nuts, or asking a bowl of water nicely. Does your apple peel form your crush's initial, or just spell out help? Only the spirits know. If you grew up in a household where fruit was more than just a snack, you've likely encountered the great Halloween apple peel prophecy. The rules: take a firm apple, bonus points if it's one of those sad ones at the bottom of the fruit bowl, peel it in a continuous ribbon, and fling the peel over your shoulder. When you turn around, the ghostly splotch of apple skin on the floor is supposed to reveal the initial of your future spouse. If the resulting shape looks more like a question mark, congratulations, your future spouse's name is Riddler. For the less dexterous among us, this game guaranteed that romance would always have a built-in air of uncertainty, or that you'd grow up excellent at interpreting abstract art. Either way, your destiny was apparently tangled up with the trajectory of a biodegradable spaghetti noodle. But apples aren't the only seers among produce. Let's not forget the ancient art of nut-cracking doom. On Halloween night, or New Year's Eve, because apparently there's no statute of limitations on anxiety, young lovers would throw 2 nuts, named for themselves and their beloved, into the fire. If the nuts popped and flew apart, heartbreak was imminent. If they burned together, true love was predicted. Of course, in a crowded, smoky kitchen with uneven hearthstones, this game was less a prophecy and more a test of how much chaos you could inflict before the adults threw your divination tools out with the hearth ashes. Water-based oracle methods, meanwhile, offered a more tranquil, if equally improbable, fate. One classic: pour molten lead or wax into a bowl of cold water, then interpret the resulting blob shape. Was it a ship, foretelling adventure? A ring, promising marriage? Or maybe an unidentifiable lump, symbolizing the amorphous dread of adulthood? Bonus points if you could argue convincingly that your blob looked vaguely like someone's initials, even if it mostly resembled a melting snowman. Somewhere between earnest belief and sheer improved comedy, these games became a contest for the wildest possible interpretation. And if all else failed, you could try onion divination, a pastime so obscure it deserves honorary mention. Write the names of potential sweethearts on onions, leave them in the dark, and whichever one sprouts first names your soulmate. Modern dating apps, meet your rustic ancestor, swipe left on the onion with mold. Through all these rituals, the underlying message is clear: humans love a good shortcut to certainty. Instead of searching for meaning in stars or spreadsheets, we look for revelations in produce sections and pantry items. Were spirits really guiding your apple peel? Was fate lurking in the kitchen fire, sizing up your nut-throwing technique? Or, just maybe, was it all a way to fill an autumn night with laughter and low-stake suspense? In any case, the appeal, pun intended, of these old Halloween games isn't so much in the answers they promise as the communal, hilarious journey to get there. Some may find love, others find a sticky floor, and everyone gets a story to retell, preferably while eating apple pie, since you've got to do something with all that leftover fruit. Youngsters don masks and go door to door, hoping for snacks or tiny coins. Anyone refusing to give offerings risks a spiteful curse or a prank involving sheep entrails. Not that much different from today's teens, actually. But rewind the clock a couple thousand years and the stakes were higher than just a temporarily egged mailbox. For ancient Celtic communities, particularly those celebrating Samhain in what's now Ireland and Scotland, this early version of trick-or-treating was nothing short of serious business. The boundary between the worlds of the living and the dead was gossamer thin on this night, and everyone agreed, if you wanted to preserve good fortune, and maybe your pet goat, it was wise to play along. In these rural villages, it was customary for children and sometimes even adults to disguise themselves as wandering spirits. Sometimes the masks were crude, fashioned from animal skins, or painted with dark dyes. Sometimes there was an elaborate effort: white sheets, painted faces, makeshift horns, or raven feathers. The point was to look frightening enough to either appease or fool the evil spirits said to be roaming freely. On the off chance a more mischievous fae or ghost mistook you for one of their own, you'd avoid supernatural pranks, or worse. The real-life pranks weren't so harmless, either. Refuse a gift at your door and you might wake up to a sheep's entrails hung from your fence, or worse, all your milk curdled by morning. The curses themselves were legendary, whispered incantations spoken just loud enough to make your skin crawl, often invoking bad luck, sickness, or sour ale, a true tragedy. Even the bravest cottager would keep a little extra bread or a few apples by the hearth as insurance against unwanted tricks from both human and ghostly callers. So what did these pint-sized Celts, and their prank-loving elders, hope to get? The treats of antiquity had little to do with chocolate bars or sour gummies. Instead, think harvest fruits, hazelnuts, crusts of bread, or perhaps, if you were really lucky, a coin or two given from a neighbor in particularly good spirits. Sometimes drinks were offered, usually a thimbleful of mead. Every morsel and every penny was an echo of the agricultural cycle, each gift a tiny bribe to ensure abundance when the fields turned green again. On All Souls' Day, children or beggars would knock at doors singing songs for the dead in exchange for soul cakes, pressed rounds of bread dotted with currants. The treats were no longer just a payment to ward off specters but a way to buy prayers for lost relatives, creating a tapestry of folklore where ancient fears and new faith met at the threshold. All this may sound quaint or spooky, but in many ways, it's astonishing how little has changed. Today's Halloween may be less about fending off banshees and more about defending your porch from plastic fangs and rubber skeletons, but the same ritual beats underneath it all: masks, knocking on strangers' doors, bargains struck to avoid mischief. Maybe we've traded in curses for cans of shaving cream or toilet paper, but the impulse remains: part celebration, part negotiation with the unknown. So, the next time you see a masked mob at your door with pillowcases outstretched, remember they walk in old, wide footsteps, part of an ancient game played on the border of darkness, harvest, and hope. Maybe toss in an extra candy bar, just in case the old spirits are still watching. It never hurts to bribe a ghost, after all. And if you forget, well, don't say you weren't warned about the sheep entrails. You desperately try to seem unafraid. The fire's glow throws long shadows on faces that suddenly look older, more secretive. The air shifts, someone drops a stick into the fire, sending up a hiss of sparks, and that's all it takes. Suddenly, each storyteller sits up straighter, eager to outdo the last tale. The oldest cousin opens with a story about a ghost dog, forever prowling the crossroads, its red eyes glinting. They fold their hands with a practiced solemnity, pausing at just the right moment for effect. For a minute, you almost believe them, or at least, you believe the dog could be close by, sniffing at the edge of the tree line. Then comes your neighbor, the one who always says they're not one for nonsense, launching into a saga about a woman in white who appears on foggy nights, beckoning travelers into the marsh. It's probably borrowed from a book, but right now, nobody cares about originality. What matters is the rising tension, the chorus of gasps, and the comfort of everyone huddled close, listening. Someone throws in their own experience: lights flickering in an abandoned barn, a door slamming where there shouldn't be any wind, an attic too cold for any sensible animal to call home. Your skin prickles with each new detail. It must have been the wind, you tell yourself, but there's always that moment of doubt. Did you hear something out in the darkness, just beyond the light? Now it's your turn. The silence is thick, hungry, waiting for your words. You stumble, trying to stitch together half-remembered tales from books and your own flashes of nightmare. Maybe you repeat the one about the restless soldier doomed to march until dawn, or the old woman who whispers secrets through cracked window panes. Your voice wavers, but you keep going. The ritual matters more than believability. Meanwhile, the littlest listeners cluster together, wide-eyed and shivering with anticipation. They want to be scared. It's half the reason they insisted on stories in the first place. But there's relief, too, in realizing that fright comes in a safe package, a story told at arm's length, surrounded by laughter and the warmth of the fire, and sets off a ripple of nervous giggles, each one proof that the menace is strictly imaginary. An adult steps in, perhaps out of mercy, or to keep things from getting too intense. A simple promise, but you cling to it like gospel, tucking it away for later when you're alone in your bed and the wind starts to moan against the window panes. After a while, the lines between truth, memory, and invention blur. Someone claims to have heard footsteps outside, just a raccoon, probably, but for a while nobody's quite sure. The world seems a little thinner, the boundary between here and elsewhere weak as cobweb thread. But that's the beauty of the ghost story hour. It turns anxiety into something communal, almost celebratory. Fear shared around a circle becomes lighter, transformed into excitement, then laughter, then comfort. Eventually, the stories peter out. Someone yawns, and it's suddenly obvious how late it's gotten. One by one, you shuffle off toward your sleeping bags, nervous energy leaving you jittery in the dark. Every creak and groan of the house feels loaded with hidden meaning. You pull your blankets up to your nose, remembering the promise. Monsters have to follow the rules, and you're safe, just as long as you don't let your toes slip out. Quiet settles over the room at last, broken only by the faint crackle of the dying fire and the slow, deep breaths of those already asleep. Somewhere in the night, you listen, half hopeful that you'll hear a ghostly whisper or the padding of spectral paws. But nothing comes, at least, not tonight. And with your heart still pounding, you drift off, half dreaming of haunted hills and debts paid to mysterious, laughing fairies. After the festivities, everyone shuffles home. Every twig snap might be a goblin, every gust of wind a spirit. You have never been so grateful for the dubious protection of your sheepskin blanket. You keep your eyes trained on the starlit path ahead, feet crunching over wilting leaves that, just moments ago, were alive with dancers and shrieks. The village is behind you now, but the echoes of old songs and the fire's warmth seem unwilling to come along. In their absence, the night swells, thick, velvet, and bristling with secrets. You clutch your blanket tighter, the rough wool as much a talisman as a shield against the chill. Ahead, the black arms of ancient trees stretch and sway in a rhythm you hope is only the wind. You try to keep your footfalls quiet, as if silence can keep the shadows content where they are. But every time a branch creaks or an owl voices its complaint, your mind races through the list of things that should, or should not, be abroad at this hour. You recall the tales told around the hearth, about will-o'-the-wisps that lure unwary travelers, or little folk who creep at the edges of vision, just waiting for a foolish soul to stray from the path. You remind yourself, as you steady your stride, that nighttime fears are as old as humanity. The trick is not to ignore the shadows, nor to give them your full attention, but to acknowledge their power and keep moving. This, after all, is Shadow Watching 101, the careful art of walking with one eye on your destination and another on the places where moonlight cannot reach. Your grandfather's advice drifts into your mind, stitched from a lifetime of midnight walks. You test the advice, glancing down. There, faint in the blue-dark grass, is your own trembling outline, wreathed in the folds of your blanket and lantern glow. But beyond your shadow, the woods seem to teem with other, wilder shades. Some flit just out of sight, others linger, waiting for something only they understand. There are practical skills to shadow watching. First, walk with purpose. Nothing tempts the restless things more than a wanderer who dawdles or doubts. Second, do not look directly at what's lurking, glance, note, but don't linger. Third, if you must speak, speak softly, and always greet the night as you would an old friend. These rules aren't just old wives' tales, they're survival skills finely tuned by generations who ventured home through the dark. The air as you walk begins to sharpen, a sign you're nearly home. Your cottage, squat and familiar, sits hunched under its steam of chimney smoke. The doorframe gleams with a weathered horseshoe, just as you left it. The sheepskin blanket, suddenly less of a barrier and more of a comfort, slides from your shoulders as you reach the threshold. Behind you, the path you took seems impossibly long, a ribbon cast through a world you're glad to have passed through in one piece. Inside, the candlelight presses the shadows back to the corners. You breathe out, as much relief as exhaustion, the old tales sliding back into memory until they're needed again. Shadow watching, you realize, isn't just about fear or folklore, it's about carrying yourself, quietly and determined, across the tenuous line between celebration and homecoming. Tonight, you have passed the silent examination. The shadows watched you, and you watched them, and nothing more was asked on either side. You slip beneath your blankets, woven of wool, yes, but also of relief, and listen to your own heartbeat settle into a rhythm older than any story. Before sleep, you perform one last ritual, tossing crumbs into the fireplace and muttering something that sounds persuasive. With luck, no ghosts find your address tonight. It's a routine so old it feels inherited, older than habit, older perhaps than reason itself, as though your hands remember the motion even if your mind is uncertain of its origins. You watch the crumbs blacken in the glow, hear the faint crackle as stale bread turns into a fleeting archipelago atop embers. The muttering comes easy. Old words, half-remembered, stitched with phrases you invent as the need arises. You hope whoever's listening is reasonable. Outside, the night air is thick with the kind of silence reserved for uneasy truces. Your ritual, simple as it is, stands guard at the threshold, an unofficial doorman charged with turning away the dead who haven't mastered the courtesy of RSVP. You do not know if ghosts are drawn by hunger or curiosity or the sheer inertia of unfinished business. But protocol insists the living make an effort, however humble, to bribe the restless to stay away. In the world of descendants and ancestors, there's never a clean break. There's only the negotiation, every night, every generation. Tiny deals struck in the hope that the boundaries hold until dawn. You wonder, sometimes, if these are bargains you inherited too, like the shape of your hands or the way you speak when tired. The fear that the past might outstay its welcome is a family heirloom, one not displayed but handed down in rituals so subtle no one teaches them. You just know. Tonight, your offering is meager, a few crumbs from this morning's bread, a muttered plea for privacy, and the old instinct to look over your shoulder before switching off the light. You feel the smallness of your insurance, bargaining with powers you're not even sure exist. There's a humility, and perhaps a touch of arrogance, in believing that your improvised incantations are enough to satisfy the invisible callers at your gate. Just beyond the window, the world is unmoved by your anxieties. The trees don't shudder, the stars refuse to blink out. But inside, you sense something loosen, a knot dissolves as if the ritual's completion grants you partial custody of the night. It might be superstition, or it might be the oldest form of self-care, carrying on the gestures that comforted those who came before you, adding your own verses to the ancient language of self-preservation. It's tempting, in these hours, to negotiate directly, to offer a clearer trade, to promise a memory or a story in exchange for a dreamless night. But the dead are notorious for tricky contracts. Their patience is infinite, their sense of humor rarely generous. So you keep the ritual vague, the term's always just ambiguous enough to avoid trapping yourself in one of their deals. As you retreat toward the sanctuary of bed, you find yourself rehearsing the possible outcomes. Tonight, the strangers at the edge of memory may respect your boundary. Tomorrow, the crumbs may fail, and your dreams might play host to inconvenient visitors after all. Such is the risk, an unending series of gambles, the prize a little peace. In the end, your ritual is less about the ghosts and more about your own uneasy alliance with night's uncertainties. You bargain with the dead not because you expect a reply, but because it's what keeps you human, resisting the urge to be entirely rational in an irrational world. It is, you realize, the final glowing ember of belonging, a soft light to see you safely into sleep. Crawl into bed with half your family and most of the available livestock. The air is thick with the smell of wood smoke, wool, and an unshakable suspicion that you forgot to close the door against the night. This is no mere bedtime routine. It's an elaborate negotiation between comfort, practicality, and survival. The bed is not so much a piece of furniture as a living organism. It creaks and sighs beneath too many people and too many animals all jostling for the warmest spot. A goat nudges closer to your toes, hoping for heat, while your youngest cousin has already claimed both the blanket and your left arm. Here, the rules of personal space are laughably suspended. Everyone is in a communal heap, matching breathing rhythms and conceding the occasional elbow to the ribs. The hearth, still glowing from the evening's fire, serves as the room's fragile heart. It sends out threads of heat, thin as spider silk, and you chase every ambient degree as if your life depends on it, because in winter, it just might. The simplest error, leaving the door ajar, a log untended, means a night spent shivering, issuing quiet curses into a blanket that increasingly smells of sheep. These are not the luxurious linens of a distant future, but thick woolen layers pile precariously, sometimes scratchy, always heavy. If you move too quickly, you risk losing your hard-fought pocket of warmth to the chill that prowls at the edge of every shadow. As the family finally settles, the sounds change. When an excited child tries to whisper just one more story, conversation is soft and close. Plans for tomorrow, worries about the weather, rumors from the nearest neighbor, who lives, inconveniently, a half-day's walk away. It's a midnight council, built on shared fears and hopes, and its venue is this cramped, comfortless, undeniably living bed. Despite the discomfort, the impossibility of a cold foot, the guaranteed occurrence of a suspiciously wet patch, the relentless reek of livestock, what you share in this sleep setup is a kind of hope. Huddling is its own language, a whispered promise. Tonight, we survive together. It's not just bodies seeking warmth, but spirits nesting in the assurance that someone, anyone, is always there. The fierce intimacy is not chosen, but accepted. A crowded bed is better than cold isolation. Even the animals, festooned along the edges of the bed, seem to understand their role as both heat source and family. Every gust of wind outside is a reminder of what you're up against. There may be blizzards and wolves beyond the door, but inside, you forge a tiny, stubborn enclave of safety. If you have ever wondered what togetherness truly means, it's this: a snore in your ear, a goat at your feet, hands clutching the same frayed edge of a blanket, all hearts beating together in the dark. Survival, here, is not heroic, but quietly cooperative, a nightly conspiracy against the cold. Gradually, sleep overtakes worry. The chorus of breath evens out, marking the strange peace that comes when there is nothing more to be done. Tomorrow may bring more hardship, but tonight, you are a fortress of bodies, stories, and shared determination. You surrender, finally, to restless dreams, the heat of others pressed close, darkness held just at bay. And somewhere, behind all the smells and sighs and shuffle of limbs, hope persists, a fragile, defiant ember, stubbornly refusing to go out. Even after all the rituals, a part of you wishes for summer, sunlight, warm breezes, and a world where the scariest thing isn't your cousin's mask. You can almost see it now, memory and hope blending seamlessly at the window's edge. The air would shimmer under the weight of midday heat, cicadas punctuating the silence with their metallic chorus. Everything outside would be dusted golden, wide open, possible. Your sneakers would squeak on sun-baked pavement as you bolt out to meet friends. No masks, no questions, no side-eye from neighbors wondering if you've gotten too close. Just laughter bouncing off porch railings and the slap of water at the pool. The sound of lawn mowers and someone's radio hissing distant 90s pop. popsicles melting quicker than you can eat them, sticky trails running down your wrists. You would stretch out on the warm grass and practice cloud gazing, believing that if you squint just right, the shapes will rearrange just for you. Dragons, submarines, maybe even a spaceship. The world, for those hours, would feel gentle, nothing lurking, nothing unearthed, nothing to be managed but the slow drift of summer. Inside, rituals kept you safe, or at least busy. Months of marching upstairs to scrub your hands to a musical chorus, double chorus, just to be certain. A refrigerator humming with food you would never quite finish. The family group chats buzzing with updates, everyone cross-examining their grocery lists, anchoring to the idea of control. You checked off the steps: mask, gloves, doorknobs. But as June crept closer, the routines grew heavier. What was supposed to shield began to feel like a net, fine-meshed but always there, filtering the sun. You started measuring days by what you missed: the chlorine tingle in your hair after a swim, the thrill of ice cream from the corner store, hands sticky, mask stuffed in your pocket, the taste better when licked in defiance of melting, of rules. There was a strange guilt layered over your daydreams. You want it all back, but you know why you can't have it yet. Still, your heart slips the leash sometimes, wondering, what if you could? In the cracks of quiet afternoons, you find yourself thumbing through old photos, beach snapshots, backyard birthday candles, shorts dusted with sand. Ordinarily, you'd laugh at the fashion, crooked sunglasses and too big t-shirts, but now, those photos glow with something more. At their edges, a kind of safety pulses, a reminder that back then, the world was smaller, risks invisible, and happiness simple as sunlight on your skin. Now, you try to catch what passes for summer: a patch of sunlight through the front window, warm air drifting from the vent, the scent of cut grass carried in by your dad's shoes. You press your hand to the windowpane and make a wish as if you were blowing seeds from a dandelion, longing for summer to return in full, unfiltered, safe, and unfinished. There's power in the wish itself, a flicker of hope that maybe soon, things can soften, the world will widen, and laughter won't sound quite so muffled. You dream of the first day you step outside, really outside, no checklist in your pocket, no instructions murmured at your back. You'll run and not count the distance, shout and not worry who hears, fall into the grass and let the sun find every part of you. You let the hope wedge itself into your chest, warm and improbable. Because even now, after the rituals, after the rules, something inside you keeps reaching for summer. For the sunlight and the safety you remember. For a day where the scariest thing is the way your cousin's mask makes her look like a sitcom burglar, not viruses or numbers or news. For a return to the season when everything felt possible, and risk was something you didn't have to name. If you wake up, congratulations, you've survived Samhain. Check yourself for curses, missing livestock, and whether anyone left you an ominous root vegetable. Tomorrow, it all starts again, minus the existential dread. Well, maybe just a little. Awakening the morning after Samhain was, for our ancestors, equal parts relief and confusion. If you were lucky, you didn't wake up to hoofprints in the ashes or find your best goat eyeing you with newfound suspicion. The air would still be thick with the smoky aftermath of last night's bonfires and the scent of singed offerings. You'd emerge from your scratchy wool blanket, still intact, with your soul presumably attached, and sneak a look outside, half expecting to see ghosts roaming the frosty hills. Survival hangovers weren't just about pounding headaches or a slight sense of shame for dancing too vigorously around the fire. They were about reckoning with the idea that you'd spent a whole night just trying to outwit a supernatural army, and maybe your neighbors too. Samhain was a reset button of sorts. You survived the night, but winter was still coming, with all its teeth and hunger and, perhaps, slightly fewer skeletal horsemen. Morning routines after Samhain had their own ritual quality. People would check on their animals, making sure none had wandered off to join a fairy parade or started speaking in riddles. Some folk would even peek into their communal stores to see if the grain had mysteriously multiplied, a blessing, or, far more likely, vanished, a possible fairy prank, or just wishful thinking. The ashes and remnants of last night's fires were carefully examined, believed to predict luck in the long cold months ahead. A strange-shaped coal? Might want to sleep with garlic under your pillow tonight, just in case. Despite the tension and sleeplessness, there were post-Samhain comforts. That first bite of whatever food survived the ritual feasting, the reassuring knock of a friend checking in, the shared laughter remembering who tripped over what root or screamed loudest at a shadow. The survival hangover had its advantages. If you made it through Samhain unscathed, you felt just a bit more invincible. Maybe you wouldn't tell the spirits to their faces, but you'd walk a little taller, even if you did still eye the rowan tree warily. Looking back, it's easy to romanticize these ancient survival strategies. For ancient people, the day after Samhain meant life went on, against the odds. No guarantee, of course. Early winter was still waiting, with its colds and shortages and long, dark nights. But for that one morning, they'd won a small victory. They'd faced the darkness and come out the other side. In our own way, we still keep the ritual alive. Instead of hearth ashes, we check our social feeds for the digital equivalent of omens. Instead of worriedly watching livestock, we keep one eye on our snack stash and another on the weather app. As you drift off tonight, wrapped in your non-haunted blankets, with a belly full of snacks that didn't need to be blessed by a druid, maybe take a moment to appreciate just how far we've come. The real Samhain meant cold toes, hungry nights, and a whole lot of rituals dedicated to not dying of fright. These people faced winter with jitters and hope, wrapping themselves in wool and superstition, never knowing if a bump in the night meant a mouse or a message from beyond. And yet, they persevered. They laughed, gossiped, panicked, and celebrated, weaving together stories and traditions that would, somehow, survive the millennia to turn into the Halloween we barely survived today. So next time you stab a pumpkin, or hide under the covers from the neighbor kid with the chainsaw mask, send a little gratitude to your ancestors. They fought off winter, ghosts, and boredom with nothing but bonfires and boiled roots. Rest easy, knowing your greatest nighttime worry is picking the right TV show and not a parade of the deceased knocking on your door. As you drift off tonight, wrapped in your non-haunted blankets, with a belly full of snacks that didn't need to be blessed by a druid, maybe take a moment to appreciate just how far we've come. The real Samhain meant cold toes, hungry nights, and a whole lot of rituals dedicated to not dying of fright. These people faced winter with jitters and hope, wrapping themselves in wool and superstition, never knowing if a bump in the night meant a mouse or a message from beyond. And yet, they persevered. They laughed, gossiped, panicked, and celebrated, weaving together stories and traditions that would, somehow, survive the millennia to turn into the Halloween we barely survived today. So next time you stab a pumpkin, or hide under the covers from the neighbor kid with the chainsaw mask, send a little gratitude to your ancestors. They fought off winter, ghosts, and boredom with nothing but bonfires and boiled roots. Rest easy, knowing your greatest nighttime worry is picking the right TV show and not a parade of the deceased knocking on your door. Good night.